Hello, my name is Shamid and you are watching me on Shamid TV today. Story name is The Town Poor. Mrs. William Trimble and Miss Rebecca Wright were driving along Hampton East Road one afternoon in early spring. Their progress was slow. Mrs. Trimble's sorrel horse was old and stiff, and the wheels were clogged by clay mud. The frost was not yet out of the ground, although the snow was nearly gone, except in a few places on the north side of the woods, or where it had drifted all winter against a length of fence. "There must be a good deal of snow to the nor'ard of us yet," said weather-wise Mrs. Trimble. "I feel it in the air. 'Tis more than the ground damp. We ain't going to have real nice weather till the up-country snow's all gone." "I heard say yesterday that there was good sleddin' yet, all up through Parsley," responded Miss Wright. "I shouldn't like to live in them northern places. My cousin Ellen's husband was a Parsley man, and he was obliged, as you may have heard, to go up north to his father's second wife's funeral. Got back day before yesterday. 'Twas about 21 miles, and they started on wheels, but when they'd gone 9 or 10 miles, they found it was no sort of use, and left their wagon and took a sleigh. The man that owned it charged 'em 4 and 6 too. I shouldn't have thought he would. They told him they was going to a funeral, and they had their own buffaloes and everything. Well, I expect it's a good deal harder scratchin' up that way. They have to get money where they can. The farms is very poor as you go north," suggested Mrs. Trimble kindly. "'Tain't none too rich a country where we be, but I've always been grateful I wa'n't born up to Parsley." The old horse plodded along, and the sun, coming out from the heavy spring clouds, sent a sudden shine of light along the muddy road. Sister Wright drew her large veil forward over the high brim of her bonnet. She was not used to driving, or to being much in the open air, but Mrs. Trimble was an active businesswoman, and looked after her own affairs herself in all weathers. The late Mr. Trimble had left her a good farm, but not much ready money, and it was often said that she was better off in the end than if he had lived. She regretted his loss deeply, however. It was impossible for her to speak of him, even to intimate friends, without emotion, and nobody had ever hinted that this emotion was insincere. She was most warm-hearted and generous, and in her limited way played the part of Lady Bountiful in the town of Hampton. "Why, there's where the Bray girls lives, ain't it?" she exclaimed, as, beyond a thicket of witch hazel and scrub oak, they came in sight of a weather-beaten, solitary farmhouse. The barn was too far away for thrift or comfort, and they could see long lines of light between the shrunken boards as they came nearer. The fields looked both stony and sodden. Somehow, even Parsley itself could be hardly more forlorn. "Yes'm," said Miss Wright. "That's where they live now, poor things. I know the place, though I ain't been up here for years. You don't suppose, Miss Trimble? I ain't seen the girls out to meetin' all winter. I've really been covetin'." "Why, yes, Rebecca, of course we could stop," answered Mrs. Trimble heartily. "The exercises was over earlier than I expected, and you're going to remain overnight long o' me, you know. There won't be no tea till we get there, so we can't be late. I'm in the habit of sending a basket to the Bray girls when any of our folks is comin' this way, but I ain't been to see 'em since they moved up here. Why, it must be a good deal over a year ago. I know it was in the late winter they had to make the move. 'T was cruel hard, I must say, and if I hadn't been down with my pleurisy fever, I'd have stirred round and done something about it. There was a good deal of sickness at the time, and, well, it was kinda rushed through, breaking of 'em up, and lots of folks blamed the selectmen, but when it was done, and nobody took holt to undo it. Ann and Mandy looked same's ever when they come to meetin', long in the summer, kinda wishful perhaps. They've always sent me word they was gettin' on pretty comfortable." "That would be their way," said Rebecca Wright. "They never was any hand to complain, though Mandy's less cheerful than Ann. If Mandy had been spared such poor eyesight, and Ann hadn't got her lame wrist that wain't set right, they'd kep off the town fast enough. They both shed tears when they talked to me about having to break up when I went to see 'em before I went over to Brother Asa's. You see, we was brought up neighbors, and we went to school together, the Brays and me. 'Twas a special providence brought us home this road. I've been so covetin' a chance to get to see 'em. My lameness hampers me. I'm glad we come this way myself," said Mrs. Trimble. "I'd like to see just how they fare," Miss Rebecca Wright continued. "They give their consent to going on the town because they knew they'd got to be dependent, and so they felt it would come easier for all than for a few to help 'em. They acted real dignified and right-minded, contrary to what most do in such cases, but they was dreadful anxious to see who would bid 'em off town meeting day. They did so hope it would be somebody right in the village. I just sat down and cried good when I found Abel James's folks had got hold of 'em. They always had the name of being slack and poor-spirited, and they did it just for what they got out of the town. The selectmen this last year ain't what we have had. I hope they've been considerate about the Bray girls." "I should have been more considerate about fetching of you over," apologized Mrs. Trimble. "I've got my horse, and you're lame-footed. 'Tis too far for you to come, but time does slip away with busy folks, and I forget a good deal I ought to remember." El Horse, though somewhat puzzled by an unexpected deviation from his homeward way, willingly came to a stand by the gnawed corner of the dooryard fence, which evidently served as hitching place. 2 or 3 ragged old hens were picking about the yard, and at last a face appeared at the kitchen window, tied up in a handkerchief, as if it were a case of toothache. By the time our friends reached the side door next this window, Mrs. Janes came disconsolately to open it for them, shutting it again as soon as possible, though the air felt more chilly inside the house. "Take seats," said Mrs. Janes briefly. "You'll have to see me just as I be. I have been suffering these 4 days with the ague and everything to do. Mr. Janes is to court on the jury. 'Twas inconvenient to spare him. I should be pleased to have you lay off your things." Comfortable, Mrs. Trimble looked about the cheerless kitchen, and could not think of anything to say, so she smiled blandly and shook her head in answer to the invitation. "We'll just set a few minutes with you, to pass the time o' day, and then we must go in and have a word with the Miss Brays, be an old acquaintance. It ain't been so we could git to call on 'em before. I don't know's you're acquainted with Miss Rebecca Wright. She's been out of town a good deal." "I heard she was stopping over to Plainfields with her brother's folks," replied Mrs. Janes, rocking herself with irregular motion as she sat close to the stove. "Got back some time in the fall, I believe." "Yes'm," said Miss Rebecca, with an undue sense of guilt and conviction. "We've been to the installation over to the East Parish and thought we'd stop in. We took this road home to see if it was any better. How is the Miss Brays getting on?" "They're well's common," answered Mrs. Janes grudgingly. "I was put out with Mr. Janes for fetchin' of 'em here, with all I've got to do, and I own I was kind of surly to 'em, long to the first of it. He gets the money from the town, and it helps him out, but he bid 'em off for $5 a month, and we can't do much for 'em at no such price as that. I went and dealt with the selectmen, and made 'em promise to find their firewood and some other things extra. They was glad to get rid of the matter the 4th time I went, and would have promised most anything. But Mr. Janes don't keep me half the time in ovenwood. He's off so much, and we was cramped a room anyway. I have to store things up garret a good deal, and that keeps me trampin' right through their room. I do the best for 'em I can, Miss Trimble, but it ain't so easy for me as it is for you, with all your means to do with." The poor woman looked pinched and miserable herself, though it was evident that she had no gift at house or homekeeping. Mrs. Trimble's heart was wrung with pain as she thought of the unwelcome inmates of such a place. But she held her peace bravely, while Miss Rebecca again gave some brief information in regard to the installation. "You go right up them back stairs," the hostess directed at last. "I'm glad some of you church folks has seen fit to come and visit 'em. There ain't been nobody here this long spell, and they've aged a sight since they come. They always send down a taste out of your baskets, Miss Trimble, and I relish it, I tell you. I'll shut the door after you if you don't object. I feel every draught of cold air." "I've always heard she was a great hand to make a poor mouth. Wa'n't she from somewheres up Parsley way?" whispered Miss Rebecca as they stumbled in the half-light. "Poor Meechin body, wherever she come from," replied Mrs. Trimble as she knocked at the door. There was silence for a moment after this unusual sound. Then one of the Bray sisters opened the door. The eager guests stared into a small, low room, brown with age, and gray too, as if former dust and cobwebs could not be made wholly to disappear. The 2 elderly women who stood there looked like captives. Their withered faces wore a look of apprehension, and the room itself was more bare and plain than was fitting to their evident refinement of character and self-respect. There was an uncovered small table in the middle of the floor with some crackers on a plate, and for some reason or other, this added a great deal to the general desolation. But Miss Anne Bray, the elder sister, who carried her right arm in a sling, with piteously drooping fingers, gazed at the visitors with radiant joy. She had not seen them arrive. The one window gave only the view at the back of the house across the fields, and their coming was indeed a surprise. The next minute she was laughing and crying together. "Oh, sister," she said, "if here ain't our dear Miss Trimble, and my heart o' goodness, 'tis Becca Wright, too. What dear good creatures you be. I've felt all day as if something good was going to happen, and was just saying to myself 'twas most sundown now, but I wouldn't let on to ells we do that changes must come, and we'd been so wont everybody's business is nobody's business, and I've come to believe it. Now don't you, Becca? You've happened on a kind of a poor time with us, but we've got more belongings than you see here, and a good large closet, where we can store those things there ain't room to have about. You and Miss Trimble have happened on a kind of poor day, you know. Soon's I get me some stout shoes and rubbers, as Mandy says, I can fetch home plenty o' little dry boughs o' pine. You remember I was always a great hand to roam in the woods. If we could only have a front room so we could look out on the road and see passin', and was shod for meetin', I don't know's we should complain. Now we're just going to give you what we've got, and make out with a good welcome. We make more tea than we want in the mornin', and then let the fire go down, since it has been so mild. We've got a good closet," disappearing as she spoke, "and I know this to be good tea, 'cause it's some o' yourn Miss Trimble. And here's our sprigged chiny cups that Rebecca knows by sight, if Miss Trimble don't. We kep out 4 of 'em, and put the even half-dozen with the rest of the auction stuff. I've often wondered who'd got 'em, but I never asked, for fear it would be somebody that would distress us. They was mother's, you know." The 4 cups were poured, and the little table pushed to the bed, where Rebecca Wright still sat, and Mandana, wiping her eyes, came and joined her. Mrs. Trimble sat in her chair at the end, and Anne trotted about the room in pleased content for a while, and in and out of the closet, as if she still had much to do. Then she came and stood opposite Mrs. Trimble. She was very short and small, and there was no painful sense of her being obliged to stand. The 4 cups were not quite full of cold tea, but there was a clean old tablecloth folded double, and a plate with 3 pairs of crackers neatly piled, and a small, it must be owned, a very small, piece of hard white cheese. Then, for a treat, in a glass dish, there was a little preserved peach, the last, Miss Rebecca knew it instinctively, of the household stores brought from their old home. It was very sugary, this bit of peach, and as she helped her guests and sister Mandy, Miss Anne Bray said, half unconsciously, as she often had said with less reason in the old days, "Our preserves ain't so good as usual this year. This is beginning to candy." Both the guests protested, while Rebecca added that the taste of it carried her back, and made her feel young again. The Brays had always managed to keep 1 or 2 peach trees alive in their corner of a garden. "I've been keeping this preserve for a treat," said her friend. "I'm glad to have you eat some, Becca. Last summer I often wished you was home and could come and see us, 'stead of being away off to Plainfields." The crackers did not taste too dry. Miss Anne took the last of the peach on her own cracker. There could not have been quite a small spoonful after the others were helped, but she asked them first if they would not have some more. Then there was a silence, and in the silence a wave of tender feeling rose high in the hearts of the 4 elderly women. At this moment the setting sun flooded the poor plain room with light. The unpainted wood was all of a golden brown, and Anne Bray, with her gray hair and aged face, stood at the head of the table in a kind of aureole. Mrs. Trimble's face was all a quiver as she looked at her. She thought of the text about 2 or 3 being gathered together, and was half afraid. "I believe we ought to have asked Miss Janes if she wouldn't come up," said Anne. "She's real good feelin', but she's had it very hard and gets discouraged. I can't find that she's ever had anything real pleasant to look back to as we have. There, next time we'll make a good heartening time for her, too." The sorrel horse had taken a long nap by the gnawed fence rail, and the cool air after sundown made him impatient to be gone. The 2 friends jolted homeward in the gathering darkness through the stiffening mud, and neither Mrs. Trimble nor Rebecca Wright said a word until they were out of sight as well as out of sound of the Janes' house. Time must elapse before they could reach a more familiar part of the road and resume conversation on its natural level. "I consider myself to blame," insisted Mrs. Trimble at last. "I haven't no words of accusation for nobody else, and I ain't one to take comfort in calling names to the Board of Selectmen. I make no reproaches, and I take it all on my own shoulders, but I'm going to stir about me, I tell you. I shall begin early tomorrow. They're going back to their own house. It's been standing empty all winter, and the town's going to give 'em the rent and what firewood they need. It won't come to more than the board's paying out now. And you and me'll take this same horse and wagon and ride and go afoot by turns and get means enough together to buy back their furniture and whatever was sold at that plaguey auction, and then we'll put it all back and tell 'em they've got to move to a new place and just carry 'em right back again where they come from. And don't you never tell, Rebecca, but here I be a widow woman, layin' up what I make from my farm for nobody knows who, and I'm gonna do for them Bray girls all I'm a mind to. I should be scat to wake up in heaven and hear anybody there ask how the Bray girls was. Don't talk to me about the town of Hampton, and don't ever let me hear the name of town poor. I'm ashamed to go home and see what's set out for supper. I wish I'd brought 'em right along. I was going to ask if we couldn't get the new doctor to go up and do something for poor Anne's arm, said Miss Rebecca. They say he's very smart. If she could get so's to braid straw or hook rugs again, she'd soon be earnin' a little something, and maybe he could do something for Mandy's eyes. They did used to live so neat and ladylike. Somehow I couldn't speak to tell 'em there that 'twas I bought them 6 best cups and saucers, time of the auction. They went very low as everything else did, and I thought I could save it some other way. They shall have 'em back and welcome. You're real wholehearted, Miss Trimble. I expect Anne'll be saying that her father's child and wain't going to be left desolate, and that all the bread he cast on the water's comin' back through you'n't care what she says, dear creature, exclaimed Mrs. Trimble. I'm full of regrets I took time for that installation and set there seepin' in a lot of talk this whole day long, except for it's kind of bringin' us to the Bray girls. I wish to my heart it was tomorrow mornin' already, and I is startin' for the selectmen.